The prophet who asked to die, and God whispered instead. According to the Bible, asterisk, there's something haunting about silence after the storm. It's not the kind of silence that brings peace. It's the one that presses against your chest like, oh wait. It's the moment after the crowd has cheered, after the miracle has passed, when the adrenaline fades and you're left standing in the ruins of your own strength. You thought the victory would feel like enough. You thought doing everything right, standing for truth, fighting the good fight, praying with every fiber of your being would satisfy your soul. But instead, something inside you collapsed, and now you're just tired, really tired. Not the kind of tired a nap can fix, but the bone-deep, soul-wearied kind that whispers, I can't do this anymore. That's where Elijah was. A prophet, a man of God, a hero in the eyes of many. And yet, not long after calling down fire from heaven and proving God's power to an entire nation, Elijah ran. Not because he doubted God's existence, not because he lost faith in what he had seen. He ran because fear overwhelmed him, because isolation swallowed him whole, because hope seemed distant and life felt too heavy to carry. And so he walked into the wilderness and laid down under a broom tree, looked up at the sky, and prayed the most human prayer a person can ever pray. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. Let that sink in. This is not the cry of a weak man. This is the groaning of a faithful servant who simply couldn't carry the weight anymore. And do you know what God did? He didn't scold him. He didn't quote scripture at him. He didn't remind him how many people looked up to him. He didn't give him a sermon. He sent an angel with warm bread and water, with rest, with kindness. And later, he whispered, this story isn't about death. It's about the God who meets us right in the place we think it's all over. It's about how our lowest moment can still hold holy ground. It's about the God who whispers when the world has been screaming. It's about being known when we feel invisible and recommissioned when we think we've failed too much to go on. Today, I want to take you into the heart of that story. Not to study it like a textbook, but to walk in it like a desert. Because maybe you, like Elijah, have found yourself under your own broom tree. Maybe you've thought that quitting is easier than continuing. Maybe no one else knows just how thin you've become on the inside. If that's where you are, this is your invitation to listen closely, not for thunder or fire or grand signs from heaven, but for the whisper, because God still whispers. And sometimes that whisper is what saves us. Let's go back not to the broom tree, but to the mountaintop. The fire hadn't fallen yet. The prophets of Baal were screaming, cutting themselves, begging their false god to answer. Elijah, confident and full of righteous fire, stood alone. One man against hundreds. And he taunted them, mocked their silence, and then calmly rebuilt the altar of the Lord, drenched the sacrifice in water, and prayed. And heaven responded with fire. It was a triumph, a spiritual climax, proof that the living God wasn't just real, he was near. Elijah had done what few dared. He stood in the gap, and God showed up. But there's something we often miss. Great victories take great energy, and spiritual highs are often followed by emotional crashes, because we're not machines. We're human. When Jezebel heard what Elijah had done, she didn't repent. She didn't tremble. She sent a death threat. And that single message broke something in Elijah. All the strength, all the faith, all the courage, it dissolved in fear. So Elijah ran. He didn't argue with God. He didn't stay to fight. He fled into the wilderness, away from everyone and everything, into a barren place that mirrored how he felt inside. Empty, drained, alone. It's easy to judge him. But let's be honest, haven't we all done the same? After giving everything to a cause, to a person, to a season of life, we hit the wall. We crash. We wonder why we don't feel strong anymore. Why the faith that once fueled us now feels distant. Elijah wasn't running from God. He was running because he didn't know what else to do. That's what burnout does. It makes the next step feel impossible. It turns purpose into pressure. It makes even the brave believe they're alone. But what if God wasn't disappointed by Elijah's escape? What if God was already waiting in the wilderness? The wilderness is not quiet in the way we think. It's loud with fears, regrets, old voices that echo back every failure we thought we'd buried. Elijah wasn't just hiding. He was unraveling. He found a tree, sat beneath it, and finally stopped running. That's when the prayer came out, not a request for strength or direction or understanding. Just this: "I've had enough, Lord. Take my life." Can you feel the weight of that? It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. Elijah didn't want to be a hero anymore. He didn't want to carry the burden. He was done. And here's the miracle. God didn't argue. God didn't tell him to toughen up. He didn't say, "Look what I just did on the mountain. Don't you have more faith than this?" Instead, he let Elijah sleep. And then, as gently as only God can, he sent an angel to touch him, wake him, and offer food and water. No commands, no sermons, just care. Elijah ate, then fell asleep again. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is rest. Sometimes heaven's greatest gift is not a voice, but a meal. Not a vision, but a nap. Not an answer, but presence. When Elijah woke again, the angel returned not with wrath, but with tenderness. "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Do you see it? God knew. He knew the burden Elijah had carried. He knew the exhaustion beneath the prophet's skin. He didn't shame him for being tired. He acknowledged it. Maybe you've been told that faith means never feeling overwhelmed. But Elijah's story says otherwise. Real faith is sometimes lying under a tree and admitting, "God, I can't." And real grace is a God who whispers back, "I know. Here, eat, rest. I'm not finished with you yet." Strength didn't come instantly. God didn't snap his fingers and put Elijah back on his feet with a fresh mission and renewed energy. That's not how healing works. Instead, Elijah walked 40 days and nights through the wilderness to Mount Horeb, the same mountain where Moses once met God in fire and cloud. This time, no parting seas, no burning bush. Just the slow steps of a weary man seeking answers. By the time Elijah arrived, he found a cave and stayed there. And God asked him the question that cuts through every heart. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Not in anger, in invitation. Elijah poured it all out. His pain, his disappointment, his loneliness. "I've been zealous for you," he says, "but they've rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets. I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me too." It's the cry of a man who believes he's failed, that everything he's done meant nothing, that all his courage ended in silence and fear. And then God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." What came next wasn't what Elijah expected. First, a powerful wind tore through the mountains. But God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake shook the rocks beneath his feet. But God was not in the earthquake. Then fire blazed. But God was not in the fire. Finally, a gentle whisper. That's when Elijah stepped out. Isn't that how God works? We look for him in the dramatic. We expect thunder, miracles, a booming voice. But when our souls are most broken, God comes in softness, not because he's weak, but because he's kind. The whisper is not a lesser miracle, it's the greater one. Because it means God is near enough to whisper. It means he sees you. That he doesn't need to shout to get your attention. He just needs you still enough to hear him. Sometimes the journey is long because the soul needs time to be quiet again. And when the whisper finally comes, it's not always a new command. Sometimes it's just God reminding you, "I'm still here. You're still mine." Elijah stood at the mouth of the cave, cloaked not in boldness, but in humility. His face wrapped in a mantle, his steps slow and unsure. Because when you hear the whisper of God, you don't march. You listen. And again, the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? Same words. But now, after the journey, after the silence, after the whisper, it landed differently. Elijah gave the same answer. Word for word. Still tired. Still heartbroken. Still believing he was alone. Still unsure if his life mattered. But this time, God didn't correct him. He didn't say, "You're wrong, Elijah." He gave him a new assignment. Go back the way you came. Go back. Yes. Not because nothing had changed, but because Elijah had changed. In burnout, he had fled his calling. But in the whisper, he found something deeper than adrenaline or fire. He found that God wasn't finished. God gave him 3 names, Hazael, Jehu, and Elisha. 3 people Elijah would never have chosen. But each one would carry part of the mission he thought rested solely on his shoulders. God didn't just send Elijah back to work, he gave him people. He gave him help. He gave him legacy. And then, God dropped a truth that rewrote everything Elijah believed about his own failure. I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal. Elijah thought he was the last one. He wasn't. That's what despair does. It narrows your vision. It makes your world so small that all you can see is your pain. But God sees the bigger picture. Elijah had done more than he realized. His obedience had stirred hearts he didn't know existed. His faith had reached further than he could measure. And his exhaustion didn't cancel out his purpose. It revealed a new way to walk in it. He wouldn't be alone anymore. Elisha would walk beside him. A younger prophet, ready to learn, ready to serve, ready to carry the mantle when Elijah's time was done. This wasn't the end of Elijah's story. This was the beginning of a softer, more surrendered chapter, one not defined by fire and fury, but by trust and legacy. That's the beauty of God's whisper. It doesn't just soothe the pain. It opens your eyes to the people you didn't know were walking with you. It reminds you that even in your weakest moment, your life still carries weight in the kingdom. So if you've been thinking your usefulness is over, it's not. God might just be giving you a new kind of assignment, one you're now finally quiet enough to receive. Elijah didn't die under that tree. He didn't end his story in a cave. He walked forward. He anointed kings. He raised up Elisha. And one day, in a way few can even fathom, he didn't even taste death. A chariot of fire came for him. Heaven honored the man who once begged to die with a homecoming like no other. But maybe the real miracle happened not in the chariot, but in the quiet. Maybe the fire from heaven didn't change Elijah as much as the whisper on the mountain. Maybe, just maybe, that whisper is what you're hearing now because you're still here. Which means your story isn't over either. You might be tired. That's okay. So was Elijah. You might be afraid. That's okay. God can handle your fear. You might feel alone. But you're not. God has people, maybe more than you realize, who are walking this road too. And even now, the whisper still comes. Not to rush you, not to fix you, but to remind you, you are seen, you are loved, you are not a disappointment, you are not beyond redemption. You are not too broken to be used again. The same God who called fire from heaven is the same God who sits beside you when all the fire is gone. And he still speaks. Not in the ways the world expects. Not in noise or spectacle. But in a whisper. And now, it's your turn. Not to perform, but to whisper back. Whisper your yes. Whisper your surrender. Whisper your hope. Even if your voice shakes. Because sometimes, the loudest faith is the one spoken in the softest voice. And when you whisper back, heaven listens. The story of Elijah is not about the end of a prophet. It's about the heart of a father who meets his child in the wilderness and gently reminds him, you still belong to me. So stay near, eat the bread, take the journey, listen for the whisper. And when it comes, don't be afraid. You're not alone in this story. You never were, and neither was Elijah.